It was the first song that I even opened myself up to something that I was so scared to write about.
Yeah.
It took a long time, man. I remember just sitting and going, how do I do this? How do I get this right, you know?
Hello, welcome to the Release Day Series podcast. I'm your host, Alex Hewer, and I hope everyone is having a great week. Hope everyone had a great weekend. It was a long weekend here in Canada. My wife and I went to a wedding. We had dinner with my parents and my in-laws and watched a lot of football. Big football fan. I don't know if anybody knew that, but really love watching football on the weekends. Trying a little bit of sports betting here and there. Nothing crazy. I'm not betting the house. I got kids, so it's just like little $1, $5 bets here and there, but makes the weeks more interesting, but not as interesting as my conversation this week with David Myles. And I first heard of David through Classified's song Inner Ninja. Maybe you've heard the song. It's only the biggest selling Canadian rap single of all time as of the recording of this. Fantastic song, and it was fantastic to discover David and go back and discover his music and his albums, because all of his albums are so wonderful, just a little bit different from the last. And the same could be said about his new one that we're here to talk about today. It's Only a Little Loneliness. And even just prior to this, in 2021, David actually released an all-instrumental album, That Tall Distance, and that actually won him a Juno Award for Best Instrumental Album of the Year. And he and co-producer Joshua Van Tassel learned a lot from the recording of that album that led into the recording of this one. So we talk all about that and the experiences and risks that David took over the last couple of years, recording from home and having the recordings from his band members doing it from home. And it's a really great story that David provides, and I think you can get a lot out of this one. And we even have like a nice little story at the end, talk about being a Classified fan myself, where I saw David in probably 2012 then, when the song came out. I saw him playing with Classified at a cool little skate shop, or with a little half pipe. We were all in a half pipe. You'll hear the story. It's a ton of fun. And really excited for you to hear this one. And before we get into it, just a reminder, you can head to our website, releasedayseries.com, check out all our previous podcast episodes and the limited video series. And you can also sign up for that bi-weekly newsletter. But sometimes it might come out weekly, depending on if we have a new episode. Sometimes I got B-side episodes like we did with Leanna Oki. So you might get an extra email in your inbox if you appreciate that. Either way, it will keep you up to date on the latest episodes. So, broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Williams Treaties First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Inuit, and Métis peoples, here's my conversation with David Myles. David Myles, welcome to the Release Day Series podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, thanks. Really good, thank you.
Hey, you've had a busy few years. I mean, it's looked really good for you. It's been really tough, but man, you've had a lot going on. You've got a Juno award-winning instrumental album and a wonderful new album, It's Only a Little Loneliness. Did you see your last 2 years starting out that way?
It's a weird thing. It was almost like I was just dealing with what was going on around me by making music. I mean, it's not like that. It was that. It was exactly that. In some ways, in many ways, it was kind of affirming, in the strangest way, because when everything was taken away, I found that I still wanted to create music. In fact, I needed to create music. And that was kind of a nice feeling, that it wasn't really just about having a tour coming up, or it wasn't just because the machine was kind of working, you know what I mean? Because this big wheel was kind of turning and trying to keep people on the road and keep everybody going and everybody happy. It was actually quite the opposite. Everything was shut down. I was with my kids all day. And then I had these little windows of time where I could really dig in, and what did I want to do with my time? What was going to set me up for the next day so I had energy for my kids? Well, it was creating music, and it was amazing. It's funny because often my most creative times, I've realized now, are in those moments of isolation and solitude. It's not when I'm out on the road. It's not when I'm in a big group of people. It's when I'm alone And then I really start to dig in. So I don't know if I thought it was going to go down that way. I don't think anybody knew how anything was going to go, but certainly it was how I dealt with the uncertainty,
Well, I was going to say that, like the one thing that, you did was you wanted to continue connecting. That was my thought as well when, in 2020, I was like, man, I still got to talk. I got to talk to people still. I still got to be connected to the music industry somehow. So I started Release Day, and you started Myles From Home podcast, which is, super cool. Guests like Classified and Shad, Rhea May, a lot, wicked names, Joel Plaskett. How did you, just before we get into the music side, just because obviously being a podcaster, I love to connect with other podcasters as well. Yeah. What was the experience like starting that up, and what you learned through building up a podcast and talking with your guests?
I mean, it was such an interesting, it's something I always kind of wanted to do. I think a lot of people, they dug into projects that they had thought about before. I remember listening to Maron, Mark Maron, and kind of going, oh, wow, there can be a show that's like these long form conversations. And it just felt like something different. And I thought, you know what, that is something I could probably really enjoy. I found myself having conversations on the road when I ran into musicians that I felt were kind of different. So much about, I think, what we were all doing over the last number of years was about finding ways to feel less alone, feel connected, right? And when you are chatting with another musician, someone in your field that is going, oh yeah, this was hard, or this was hard, or I find this, then you kind of go, yeah, actually I do too. Or someone hopefully who's listening is going, yeah, I relate to that. And so that's what it was all about for me. And I mean, I'm lucky because I've played music for a number of years, so there's a lot of people who were willing to say yes and wanted to do it without much of a plan,
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool. At first we did it YouTube. We don't do it live on YouTube anymore, because everybody's got so much going on. It's hard to do a live event in the same way.
Right.
But, in those early days of the pandemic, man, and I'm sure you found the same thing, like there was just this confluence of like, obviously people looking for stuff to do on certain times, but that live energy, I mean, it made me freak out and made me nervous, but it did make me feel like, okay, it kept me going, and it kept me on that show kind of energy of like, okay, it's counting down. We're going to hit this thing at 8:00 p.m. Very different than doing pre-tape stuff. It's like it landed, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with like technology that you don't really understand. Yep. I'm just trying to figure this stuff out, and I'm running through Ecamm, and I've got the guest waiting, and then all of a sudden you're like, there's just so many technical elements, and you're trying to conduct a live interview to a live audience that's commenting on stuff. Man, I would finish those interviews and just be exhausted.
I was going to say exhausted.
Exhausted, but I loved the energy. I did. And, sometimes I kind of miss that. Like, I mean, I do, I'm still loving doing the podcast, no doubt. And I actually kind of prefer it to be able to be pre-taped, but there is something about that live energy that was fun for the time and place. It was great. I connected with a lot of people, and I'm still connecting with people. But now, it's just a little different because we're able to do it when people are, in their, everybody's busier now. So you find a time, you do it. But again, I get so much from these conversations, and I'm always so amazed with how open and honest people are. I'm grateful because I think it makes everybody feel, less alone. It's so easy when you're in any kind of profession, I think, to think that your problems are uniquely yours. And the more you speak with other people, you kind of go, oh, wow, man, they struggle too. Or like, it doesn't matter. Biggest career, you can be talking to the biggest stars. You know what I mean? And they can have the biggest issues, you know what I mean? The biggest challenges, the biggest fears, the biggest anxieties, those kind of things. It's not, we tend to think that it's like there's going to be a moment when you arrive and everything's kind of clear. It's not how it goes. And so
no,
I think I've learned that just by having those chats.
That's cool. Well, I got to hand it to you, man. I never did live with my podcast. So for you to have started out live, like, way to go. Good on you, man. Like I was like, I'm pre-taping.
The first few were just insane because I just didn't know, like I didn't have anything. It was like full lockdown. Again, you couldn't get gear on the internet, and like I had a little light box that was like handmade and from a friend down the road. He was the only person that was like in my bubble, you know what I mean? Like he had helped me kind of set up some lights, and then I had like a microphone that was like dangling over my head out of the screen, and I was doing light tests I didn't know what I was doing, and then slowly I started to figure this stuff out. It was the same way with making That Tall Distance. The same thing happened when I was making that record. It forced me to look at technology in a different way. I had ignored it. I was basically a Luddite. You know, I could play music and I could get in the studio and we could all get together and jam and make it work. But all of a sudden I knew that wasn't an option. So while I was I got less scared of learning new things. And that was a huge lesson. Maybe the biggest lesson of the pandemic in many ways was that all of a sudden I realized the value of YouTube. Like, it's ridiculous. You can learn so much.
Yeah, you said gamers, eh? You learned a lot from the gaming community in there,
the gaming
Twitch.
Community, absolutely, man. It was so big on live streaming. They were ahead of live streaming, right? They had been live streaming their games for years. So it was like when I started looking at like, okay, well, what camera should I get? What lighting setup should I get? What's the best thing to do, you know, connect these things live and all these kind of things. So much of that was developed by the gaming community. And you'd watch these YouTube videos of these gamers and their stuff looks amazing. Like, it's super well lit and they're like,
so good.
Sounds good. And you're like, wow, you know, and so that really helped. Helped. And then you can kind of transfer that same thing towards working on Pro Tools or GarageBand. I work on GarageBand and cool. You know, GarageBand now I work on Logic, but when I started it was just GarageBand. You could just look up, okay, well, how do you edit in GarageBand, or how do you add compression or whatever? The next thing you know, there's like a video of some Swedish dude in a perfectly lit room was like, hello, you know, this is exactly how you do the thing that you're asking. Like, you know what I mean? It's just amazing. So yeah, it's nice.
I've found that, you know, not being a professional musician myself, but having, you know, looked at the history of a lot of classic rock bands anyways, you know, in terms, like, I go back to Van Halen or Led Zeppelin, you see sort of those kinds of developments as older bands. And I kind of have looked at, I have another video podcast and same thing that you're mentioning, you kind of see this evolution of like camera placement, mic placement, video quality, audio quality, start to kind of go from 0 to, I'm never going to say 100, but it starts getting a bit higher there. And that's kind of what I've likened that to, and I'm sure maybe you could say the same thing. Being a professional musician is, you know, you got to give yourself that opportunity to grow and start and notice kind of what you need to maybe work on and see what things you can develop and make better as you keep going, and not being afraid of that, not being afraid to start low quality, not being afraid just to get started.
I mean, people talk about it all the time, fear of failure.
Yeah.
It's like, really, it's about the fear of failure. It's about actually, and I'm not saying I've overcome it by any stretch. I'm terrible. Right. Everybody is. It's a natural feeling. But I think part of that is, as a beginner, you fail. Yeah. You don't necessarily land every trick. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and so to go back to that as I'm 41, is a funny feeling, right? When you're a kid, when you're watching your kids learn something, they get fairly used to it at a certain age. It's still hard for them. They get fairly used to picking up a new activity and what it looks like those first few days. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, we kind of get less used to it, and certainly a lot more, you know, we avoid those situations. And all of a sudden it does. I think you're right. You need to put yourself in positions where the learning curve is steep, and you are going to kind of make mistakes. And I was kind of forced, I think a lot of people were forced into that, and it was good. Now I'm looking at stuff and I'm kind of going, wow, man, I learned more in the last couple of years than I have for so long. And now I'm able to do stuff at home. I feel so much more kind of, I guess, in control, or not in control, but I just have I have a better sense of how things are made now, because I always outsourced everything. I outsourced especially the recording process. And all of a sudden now, as you said, you know, like, you're able to kind of learn from your mistakes or learn just from observation. I can now listen to what I'm recording and kind of going, okay, well, what should I do differently? Or where am I overthinking? Where am I? And that's a really different thing. Like, when I was in a studio environment with a producer, it was on the clock. There's a band waiting for you. There's a producer there. There's a studio that you're renting. It's not like you can just sit there and be like, is this really, like, you can, but I didn't really feel like that was my place as much. Whereas now I have this a bit of space to kind of go, how do I actually really want this to sound? How do I really want this to go down? And I found like that's actually more important to me than having like the best of every single piece of gear.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I think that's a good segue to talk about your new record, It's Only a Little Loneliness, because you talk about how the album was written with the band in mind. They were your muse. And did you feel like now, because you weren't really locked into that in the studio, producer time, band member time, that you were able to think a little bit more about that, about your band members and the instrumentation and things like that leading into the creation of the record?
Well, I think it almost yeah, there was a little bit of both of that. There was a little bit before and a little bit after, because I could definitely, it did allow me space. There was space. I had space, a safe space, which was my zone, right? Which is me here at my computer, looking at what I wanted to do. And then Josh Van Tassel, it's important to mention, he's an absolutely instrumental part of this collaboration, because he and I started that Tall Distance together. That was the record that came before this, the instrumental record. That was experimentation, pure experimentation, to see what we could do from a distance. How musical could we make it? How many sounds could we get? What kind of diversity could we create? What kind of sonic environment can we create? And all of a sudden we were like, whoa, we can do more. I think I realized we could do more than I had first imagined. And so my imagination just kind of went further and further as these projects developed. And the reason I say Josh is so important is that he brings a professional. I'm learning on the fly. He has learned over the last 20 years. He mixes, he's a refined engineer. He's an amazing drummer. And so I have room to be a little bit, my crossfades are not super tight. My edits aren't great. You know what I mean? But I can paint a picture, and then he can really refine it and kind of go, okay, I get what you're doing. And then boom. And then I always say he puts a bow on it,
Nice.
So it is a collaborative thing very much between how Josh and I work. I record stuff, he lays down drums. And then once we get the drums on, then I can send it out to these different players. And the thing is, I know I'd made tons of live records. This is like my 15th record or whatever. So I've made lots of records where everybody was playing in the same room, and I love that.
Yeah.
But my challenge was, how do I get that feeling when we're actually doing it this way, where we can't be in the same room? And what I found that was super interesting to me was everybody had this space. I would send them to Josh, and then Josh I'm not there beside him. I'm not going, can you do that right now? I'm going, send that to me when you're ready. And then he goes in when he's in a good spot, when he gets his mics placed in the way he wants, and then lays it down. And then he goes, maybe that's not exactly how I want to sound. Boom, does it again. And then he sends it. So he has a little moment in his own zone where he can hone in. And then it goes to the bass player. And the bass player, again,
same thing.
What I found, they were taking risks that I don't know if they would have taken if we were in the studio all, maybe now, because we set the thing, but I could basically just, I would give little direction, but everybody could go, really take it where they felt really comfortable. And then I say before and after, because then I would get all the tracks. I'd have them here, and I'd be able to sit with them for a while and go, you know what? I kind of hear the pedal steel solo coming first, then the organ solo. And then I'm going to have some horns here. And I could kind of arrange things both before and after, which was because all the tracks were separated. It was this amazing kind of like I could do the arrangement. And I had never had that luxury. I'd never had the keys to the car. I didn't have the tracks. I couldn't just go home. The producer had the tracks.
Yeah.
So I couldn't just go, hey man, can we, I would do that. I'd be like, oh yeah, can we try some reverb or whatever? But it's not like you're trying to explain things. Whereas if you're at home, I can go, oh yeah, you know what? I want to hear these guitars panned, or I want to hear this type of reverb. I want to hear a delay on the vocal. I want to hear some trumpets here. I could do all this stuff. And there was no one saying, you can't do that, or that's a dumb idea, or if you do that, you're going to have phase issue. It was nothing like that. And so it was extremely liberating. And that's why I'm so excited about the project, is because for the first time I was like, I feel like I got no one else to blame. You know what I'm saying? It's on me. It's on me. It was how I wanted things to sound. And Josh is such a great collaborator that you still feel like that, even when you work in collaboration with him, so that you arrive at a place that feels like it's very much the vision that I was hoping for. He enhances the vision. And that's very special.
Well, it is a profound statement. The title of the album, It's Only a Little Loneliness, and you mentioned it yourself. It's it might seem like nothing to say it to yourself, but it really, it's a big deal, and I think it can be said for quite a few things people might have said to themselves over the pandemic, or it won't, it won't be that much longer, or, it's you soon we'll be back to normal is another thing as well. You chose to make it an instrumental, the title track. How did you kind of come to that sense? Because I feel like, any other musician might have been like, that's all, it gotta be the hits, the title track of the album. But you went the instrumental route. What made you feel like the instrumental title track was the way to go?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I basically, in making both of these records, I kind of tied them together because they were both made with a different kind of ethos, which was just instinct. Don't really, I think I would have considered that before. Yeah. I would have gone, it needs to be the hit.
Right.
Or it needs to be the lead track, or at least something close to the lead track. I've done that many, many other times. I just wasn't concerned about that stuff this time. I was just trying to look at things as a project and go, what is it really trying to say? And the interesting thing about that is that, of course, It's Only a Little Loneliness, I had named that instrumental before I had named the record. We made the instrumental, and my philosophy on the instrumental was truly come up with, I would name it as soon as I laid down my tracks. I would almost always name it before it even became a song with everybody. Like the first thing that came to my mind. And those were the words that came when I was making that track. And I kind of looked at the title and went, that's interesting. Like that would be the title, especially where it's not a lyric, right? Again, it's not like it just came up from a lyrical thing. It just came from hearing the music and kind of going, or just what I was thinking about at that particular moment. And I just thought, no, that's the title. That's a good title. And that's the title. That is where I'm at. So I didn't really think about whether it was an instrumental song. In fact, I think it's kind of neat because it draws people to that side of the record. If they're wondering, if they're just going to go to the title track and then they hear that, they're going to be like, oh, that's cool. But, it's interesting. I just worked from a different place on this record that was very, again, liberating, because I wasn't just thinking about following the kind of those preconceived norms in terms of just like, oh yeah, the title track's got to be this, or it's got to be this many songs, or it can't have instrumentals and songs with words on it, or and so it was just mostly just about following instinct and going forward and trying to make something really cool.
Walk with me. Is this the first time you've really sung fully about your faith?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even, it's an interesting thing. Like I would say definitely in this way. No doubt. Like this was more open, and I wouldn't, I would say it's about my faith, but it's about faith. It's about this idea more than anything. It's about kind of coming from the outside. Like I didn't grow up in a religious family. I'm not a church goer, but it was more that I was looking at things from the outside. This idea of like spiritual yearning. This kind of thing that, we all kind of yearn for a certain wholeness or a certain spiritual satisfaction, particularly when we're in difficult times. And sometimes we call out for help and we don't even know where we're calling, like, especially when we're on the outside. Like I think people who are used to a certain rhythm in their lives, their faith lives or their religious lives, actually have a certain sense of what to do. But from the outside, I think it was, for me, that song was mostly about being like, I don't know what this is about, but it sounds interesting, and I'm calling out to it as a way to relate to the creator. And so I thought it was a funny thing, because I was thinking about all this stuff so much. I really do. I think about that. I love ancient wisdom. I love spiritual writing. I read it all the time. And this one felt like, I was scared, man. I was scared. That's why it's the first time. I mean, first time because it's kind of new for me, but also scared because I was scared of the idea of writing something that came across as religious.
Right.
And I know that there's so many people who are allergic to that language, and myself included at times, where I'm like, this isn't for me. This is for other people that believe this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And there's a line, and I'm on one side and they're on the other side. I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to be about the human experience of spiritual yearning, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And looking for wholeness. and hearing about faith traditions and how they operate and what they bring to people, and peace, inner peace, and these kind of things. And so that's where that song came from. I think that it certainly was the first song that I'd written about faith in that way, but in other ways it was the first song that I even opened myself up to something that I was so scared to write about, you know?
Yeah.
So I took a long time on that one.
Yeah.
It took a long time, man. I remember just sitting and going, how do I do this? How do I get this right? You know?
Well, I love that, man. It chills every time I listen to that track, and there's just, I think you're right. I mean, whether I understood sort of where, you know, if I needed your explanation a bit or your insight on the background of it, there was something that hit me with that song, and that does hit me, that every time I'm like, man, like, it's just, yeah, who's there? Like, who can, you know, who's going to help me, and who, you know, what can I look into, or, you know, what, you know, where's the hope almost, right?
That's,
you know?
that's exactly it. I mean, that's what it is about. That's what it is about. That's what faith is about, right? It's about calling out, not knowing, but hoping.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about not knowing, but hoping, and being okay with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And being embracing mystery.
Yeah.
It kind of ended up becoming the whole theme of the record, but in particular, that song is really where it's been interesting, of course, because I find that the songs that you're most scared of, when you're digging into those places, are the ones that people will respond to the most, because you're tapping into something that feels vulnerable and feels real, because it is real, and it is how you are feeling, and therefore other people have likely felt the same way. And so it's been interesting to put it out there and feel people's responses. It's been really, really rewarding. It's been really, really rewarding. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that you enjoy it. And yeah, it's been a fun journey for sure to write that. But I am reticent of, you know, I'm aware of how, but how people think about faith and how people, you know, relate to it, particularly religion. And I'm aware of that. And so I try to, you know, I really want to be able to write music that relates to people, everybody, you know. And so I had to get that perspective right, you know. And I remember thinking about Jesus. I was thinking to go right to it. You know, I was like, do I put the word Jesus in this song?
Right.
I mean, you know that as soon as you say that word, it's going to turn people off.
Yep.
You know, it's going to be I didn't want that, but I also thought, no, this is what this song is about. This is about looking at this particular faith tradition from the outside and going, what is this about? I'm calling. Mm-hmm. What is this? What's forgiveness? Why is that one of the most important things? Why really? And that's related to spiritual liberation. It was like a fascination, and I felt like if I took out that element, I wasn't being true. When the song starts flowing, you just got to follow your nose. You got to go there, even if you're scared. That's kind of your job.
Definitely. Well, not that you need my validation, but I'm really glad you did it, and I'm really glad that you went through with it and you stuck to it, because I love the song. I love just the way it makes me feel. So, you know,
thank you. Thanks, Alex. That's awesome.
Kudos for moving forward with it, man. And I think a lot of that has to do too with harmonies and wonderful backing vocals and contributors vocally to this record. The Smith sisters, obviously on that one, and a couple others, Bria Isabel, Rose Cousins. I mean, it is just wonderful harmonies and accompaniment on this record. What was it like sitting down with them to work some of these out? Because even when you listen to your live videos with them in the room, it's like you feel like you guys have been doing this for years together. What was the process of working with them?
It's amazing. You know, again, like speaking of Muse, you know, I mean, I think, you know, the Smith sisters, it has been a number of years. We've probably worked together for 8 or 9 years. You know, Haley was 15 or 16 years old when we started working. She couldn't get into the bars. Like, it was no joke. But their gift is so unbelievable. And they're really great people, but the way they engage with music is so profound and real and awesome and so inspiring. And that I did find myself going, I can't wait for the day when I can write the right music where the space is there for them to really occupy that space. And so once we started getting that instrumental record going, and I knew the next thing was gonna keep this band cooking, this vibe cooking, I was like, okay, well, wait, this is gonna be next level when we bring in Haley and Renee on this stuff. And so I do find myself kind of writing choruses with kind of like hearing, okay, yeah, this would be cool, and leaving spaces and knowing. And, you know, Rainey's a whiz, like real whiz when it comes to studio stuff. So again, I would be able to send her these tracks and she would have time with her and her sister, and they would come back with these amazing, amazing, amazing parts, which add so much energy. I mean, part of this project was about relationships. It was all about these relationships that were not just one-time relationships. It was all people who I've known for a while, sometimes first time playing, but most of them, they were friends in some capacity. And so, you know, part of the excitement was getting the right songs, having time to know, okay, this is going to be the right person for this. And then having that relationship that they were willing to go in on it and make it sound great. And like, they really, really did. It was something else to just, to each of them. Bria's ridiculous. Rose is the most natural singer I've ever heard. And so, I mean, it also just shows the talent level, you know, the talent level on the East Coast everywhere. But
it's huge out there, man. I mean, it is huge everywhere, but I've actually found myself speaking to more people from the East Coast on this podcast than I think anywhere else. Because like I've just been, I mean, I love the East Coast. Anytime I can get out there and visit is fantastic. It's just a whole different vibe. It's so good. But man, just the talent level coming out of New Brunswick to Newfoundland is it's remarkable. And you know, I think a lot about it is just, again, I've been lucky enough to do this for a while now, and I've you know, found musicians that I not only love to work with, but I love as people, and we get on well, and we have a long-term relationship. So I'm just like, so I get to be the person with, you know, the keys in the car, and I get Josh, who's such an amazing collaborator in terms of making it all work and sound great and finding where it needs to go. And it's just like, honestly, it feels like the culmination of 20 years in it. And this wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had those relationships. And so when you get, I remember, like, I will go walk in the woods every day, and I remember actually getting that Walk With Me track and those vocals for the first time. And I thought, I knew it was going to be powerful, you know, because the song was already feeling powerful when I was just playing it by myself. I felt like we had honed it in, and I was like, okay, this is going to be good. And then those vocals dropped in, and I just went, it's like, you know, it was just magic, because they add that spiritual element. That's really what it is. Does. It's like you hear that and you go, whoa, okay. Sounds like a choir.
Well, this is it, right? Like, to me, it was like, here's this person slogging in the earthly world with his desperation, lost. You know what I mean? Like, like we all can feel, you know, breaking down, not complete, looking for answers, looking for purpose, all of those kind of things. And then there's these voices that are like in this different realm that feel so good and spirited and powerful and together. And, you know, and so it answered the question, you know, musically and kind of spiritually. Like, it was just very, very satisfying. And singing with them live, it's insane. It's insane because their connection to one another is so deep.
Yeah.
And now they're singing with everybody. I mean, they sing with Matt. They're going on tour with Matt Anderson. They were just at Massey Hall with Joel Plaskett. So,
man, Rainey's going out with Classified.
Going out with Classified. You know what I mean? And so so they're busy. And you know what? Wicked. Love it.
Yeah.
100% there for it. Micah, their cousin who sings with them, world class. The three of them especially. I don't get to sing with Micah as much, but man, the three of them, they could sing on any tour in the world. You could put them on a stage and they would absolutely thrive. Amazing. And they would, you know, that's just, it's special. It's special. And we're lucky. We're so lucky around here to have musicians like that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I kind of started the podcast to start talking about sort of release plans and strategies, and I often find myself going down just talking mostly about the songs and the album and things like that, and I love that just as much. But I'd also love to kind of get your thoughts on releasing this project. Was there anything, a different strategy, different thoughts in mind when it came to releasing this project during, what the music industry is facing right now?
I'm really lucky to have Sherry Jones in my life. Okay. Sherry Jones is my manager. She's been my manager for almost 15 years. She manages Joel Plaskett and Gordy Sampson and Mo Kenny. And, awesome. She's just deluxe as a human being. She's wise, patient, understanding, has been in the business for a long time. And so she's really good at telling me to slow down. Nice. When I finish a project, I'm fired up. You have to be fired up. If you don't think your record's going to change the world, then don't make records.
Nice.
You gotta believe in your record. You have to. And reality will sink in later, and that's okay. That maybe it didn't change the world, or not. It didn't become the biggest record in the world. But before you release that record, you need to believe that that's what's going down. That's what I think. If you're not as fired up as you gotta be. You got to think that this is the one. This is the one. This is it. This is going to, and I love that feeling. So I'm fired up. And I remember each time with both of them, especially this one, I was like, okay, we're going to put this out all at one time. Just drop it. Just drop it. Surprise release, because I was working so fast and instinctively and having a great time. And I was like, I don't want to overthink this. I haven't overthought anything else. We just moved and it was all rolling and,
move over, Drake. Then, David Myles has the surprise drop.
Exactly.
All right?
It's not exactly the same surprise when you just don't have friggin' 3 billion fans. So it's a different. Sherry is very good at being like, basically hold your horses, chill. Let's keep things tight for a second. Let's just make a plan. This is the other thing is when you finish a record, you can feel like, and this is common. I hear this a lot with younger artists. And I too have to remind myself, is that you finished a record and you think the world needs to hear it right now. You need to, that like everybody's waiting for what you have to drop because it feels so, and that somehow it's going to be less relevant in 3 months. And I was kind of downplaying the release, I think, to a certain extent, this idea of just like throwing it down, not doing a real release strategy and engaging a publicist and planning a tour and these kind of things. And I got to give it to Sherry, Sherry really looked at it as being like, no, this is a legitimate project. This is not a side project. This is not just something that you just drop and then don't promote or just put out online and just, it was the same thing with That Tall Distance. This is one of the things I respect most about Sherry is that she looks at my output and my projects with equal importance. She doesn't let me just like kind of downplay certain ones. And, she's like, no, this is a real project. We're going to give it its due. We're going to give every project its due. And its due in this case was give it a bit of time, release a couple singles first, get a publicist. Let's, figure out what we're going to do. Are we going to get an American publicist? This time we didn't, Are we going to do American radio? This time we didn't. Are we going to do a Canadian publicist? Yeah. And we're going to do Quebec, and we're going to do this, and so we did. We set out a plan, and I had more time then, and I spent a lot more time, getting the content done in advance, the video content, all stuff that I've kind of learned over the pandemic, which is just like, do it months in advance, have it for when the record drops,
Yeah.
And so those live videos we planned, that was before the record came out, and it required some planning, but it worked. And then all of a sudden we had these great live videos, and for a number of the songs we had different content for each thing, and that made a huge difference. And it was all about having time and being able to look ahead and know what you're going to need, instead of going, oh, I need this. What do we do now? Record's out. I need a video for this single. I need a performance of this single. Single's out. We should do a performance video. It's like, well, that's going to be hard to pull off, especially with people now, because it's going to be busy. So we just had a bit more foresight because of the time and planned some of that, rollout. I'm an independent artist, so you got to, it's not like I'm financing this stuff. So it's kind of like you do have to plan in advance and be careful about where you're spending and how you're spending and what your priority items are going to be. And so that becomes a big part of the question. But man, Sherry's Sherry's a real organizer, and Sarah, shout out to Sarah too, who works with Sherry, and Sarah's really great and communicates really clearly about the plan. And so, despite my efforts, they actually convinced me that a plan was important, and it really was, because it's made for it's probably the best release we've ever had, I suspect. Really,
awesome.
Honestly, yeah.
That's awesome. That's what you work towards too, is just trying to make everything better than the last, more improved than the last.
That's right. And being comfortable with the idea that everybody's working, everybody's trying. You're not going to get everything. Not everything's going to move all the time. But as long as you are making sure that you are doing everything you can, and you're connecting with your fans, feeling the love from, getting directly to your supporters and the people, that's where it starts always. And that they feel loved and appreciated, and that they're connected to what you're putting out. It starts there always.
Do you feel like this album, at least maybe, or to this point, has brought a greater attention to you? Would you ever, because the thing that I think about too, that artists maybe don't think about as well, you talk about they need to get the album out, they need to get the song out because everybody needs to hear that. When you think about songs that end up getting traction that have been released 2 or 3 years ago from artists or previous artists, whether it's from TikTok, or maybe they just decided that I'm going to put some more focus on a previous track. And I know that there are bands as well that have, once they've gained traction from a new piece, will put out sort of like either like a greatest hits or like a live album or something to just bring some more attention back to their previous catalog. Have you noticed any additional traction due to this record that maybe have you think about re-releasing anything from the past?
I don't know. Not yet. It's kind of like the dream. Like Classified, and I always joke about that. Like everybody's dream is that their past catalog is going to be what kind of like, it's like that a dream that like, oh, I knew it, man. I knew it was going to change the world. It just took 15 years. And like someone went digging and they found this crazy nugget, like track 8 from a record from 2011,
Yeah.
I knew that was the one,
Yeah.
But the reality is it just doesn't happen that much. Like even with your favorite artists, how much often you kind of start with what you're feeling. That's what brought you to the record. If anything, we love the art often, even with artists that we've loved for a long time. It's the record that we heard that made us fall in love with them that we are still most attached to. And we rarely sometimes we don't even go forward with the band. We actually stay in that world, let alone go back. So it's interesting. I do think now with streaming, it's changed because, of course, the way that the algorithm favors songs, it just kind of lets certain songs rise. So the answer actually to your question is yes, because every time you release something, they go to your page and they generally hear, let's say, your top 5 songs. And I'm cool with that, like I actually kind of like, I'm cool with what's there. I'm cool with the records that we've put out. I think it's a different attention. I think it's going to take a minute for people. Like I do think that it's a different attention that's coming to my music now because the sound is a bit different. And so it's about kind of like, I think hopefully what people are going to be getting on to is just like, oh yeah, that guy's up to some cool stuff. And then they might go back to the back catalog and go, oh, actually he always was, or listen to this, or, like it's my biggest song on Spotify by far is Turn Time Off, which was recorded in like 2010.
Cool.
With Joel Plaskett, But I still listen to it and I'm like, it's pretty sweet, man. And it's like getting played more now than it ever was. It had a huge bump like 2 years ago. So it's exactly, it got played on Working Moms on that show and then just
nice.
Went all over the place.
Yeah.
And now it's operating at a really high level. I'm just getting added playlists every week. Like it's still my most performing song. And so it does happen, and I'm proud of that. I think it's cool. I think it's great to have a catalog, and I do find the way that the songs kind of move according to how listeners respond to them is I know that there's lots of problems with the streaming service, but I find that, like, from my perspective, fascinating, because the songs, it's not about the hits that you choose all the time. Right? It's not about the fastest song. It's not about the 3-minute radio song with the big chorus, the obvious single. No, it's not. You go to people's you go to their page, and sometimes it's a quiet ballad, sometimes it's a Christmas song, sometimes it's an instrumental. The way that music can spread now is so interesting.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I find that you got to be aware of how that works. If you approach it from the radio perspective, like we did 10, 12 years ago, it's not going to work. right? Turn Time Off wasn't played on the radio.
Right.
It's a ballad.
Yeah.
And it was probably the fourth single from that record. It was the title track because we knew it was a strong song, but it wasn't the first single it wasn't the song that got played on the radio. Need a Break was, it's just how it's because it was the upbeat one. But now with Spotify, people are listening for every type of environment. I find it so interesting.
And hey, Ben, with the focus that Elvis is getting, maybe Real Love is going to be an album all of a sudden people start finding and going.
I know, man. I might have been, this is kind of that dream, right? Is that you always just want to think that you were just so far ahead that the audience missed it. And then they'll come back and be like, oh, he was a secret genius living in the woods in New Brunswick. Don't know if that's going to happen, man. But yeah, I did. Yeah. Totally. But that is true. I should probably be pushing that a little bit harder these days, the old Real Love record. It was fun record, man. Fun record to make. That was super fun.
I believe it, man, because it's a ton of fun to listen to.
It was upbeat and it was rocking and great. Oh, yeah. Again, same band, like a lot of the same players I still play with. That was a touring band record and it was a fun record.
That's great. Well, my wife thought I was listening to Elvis, just so you know.
There you go.
Like,
good.
Who is this?
Good.
Like,
yeah, the secret.
Myles. She's like,
the lost tapes.
So, yeah, I don't know. Push it to your manager, Alex from the Release Day Series podcast. Real love out there. Awesome, man. Thank you. What's happening? You're on tour now, right? You're out. You're starting a tour.
I'm out next week. I go. So I think our first date is on the 13th. So I fly on the 12th out to Victoria, and then we play in Sydney, which is just outside of Victoria by the ferry. And then we head on to the mainland and play Burnaby, just outside of Vancouver, and then head through the Rockies, and then right through the prairies, and then into Ontario. So it's like,
look at that.
It's pretty much a good part of a month that we're going to be playing shows around Canada. And it's not an easy time to tour. It's expensive. There's like so much about it that you're just like, whoa, this makes no sense.
but I've got to do it.
If I dwell on the parts that don't make sense, it just won't. It's going to be miserable. So I'm not. Yeah. I've decided we're doing this, and we're gonna have a really good time. If I have to freaking go crazy, because I'm lucky. I'm so lucky to have this band with me. It's Alan and Kyle, the trio. We've been playing together for almost 15 years. We're tight. We know each other deeply. We play. They know everything, and so. It's special just to be back at it after the last couple of years. There were so many moments where I thought, okay, well, even if I go back to touring, it's going to look totally different. And to think, no, we're not only are we touring, but we're touring together again. We really did think, no, that was a beautiful moment. Great while it lasted, new chapter kind of thing. Now we're still at it. So no, I'm feeling pretty grateful. It's going to be fun.
That's great. Well, David, I gotta say, last thing here. I think the first time I saw you, heard of you, and I saved this to the end in case you wanted to shut this off, was through Inner Ninja by Classified. I'm a big Classified fan. I think I saw you play live with them in Toronto at a skate park. Do you remember? Were you part of that show?
At a skate park?
Were you not there? I thought
was it at a skate? Was it a skate it was indoors?
Indoors. So yeah. It was on top of a half pipe.
Yes, absolutely was there. Scratch Bastard was there.
Yeah.
I got a pair of... Buddy, it's actually hilarious. My indoor... The shoes I'm wearing right now, these shoes right here, I got that night.
What?
I was wearing... Yeah, because there was a shoe store attached to that skate place. There was there were or some sort of shoe store. It was...
Amazing.
I have no idea what that was about, but it was it was when things were cooking. There was so much stuff going on for a little while.
I don't know if it was like a secret show, but I know that it was sort of like on the, so it was on the DL. And I came by early, I snuck in right ahead and I met Scratch Bastard. And I might have said hey to you, but there was some people around. And then I was like, okay, I better get out of here before they kick me out and don't let me in for the actual, actual show. But I've been following Classified since 2009, 2010 now.
Oh yeah, right.
And so I'm trying to make it to every show, and you were at that one.
Oh, and, he's incredible. I mean, Luke is really an incredible person. He's one of my best friends. We talk a lot.
That's awesome.
And I really think that he's one of the most gifted songwriters in the country. No doubt. I mean, I think people forget that that's what he's doing. He's writing songs and telling stories, and he's so good at doing that thing we were talking about earlier, which is that honesty piece, talking about his perspective, not someone else's perspective. How does he feel? And I've seen him just do the most. He does it on every record. His new stuff he's been sending me he just keeps that level up where you're like, it's so introspective and so personal. And you feel like I'm listening to the perspective of one person. You don't know exactly where it's going to come from, what his take is on these things, but you listen to it and you're like, wow, that is such a great take on these things. I find him an incredible communicator.
Well, he said it too in talking with you, every album from Grateful On has been his last album or something like that. And I mean, I want to be honest, like I'm always surprised to hear him come out with new stuff because I'm like, you've been doing this for so many years. You had 9 albums before people knew who you were. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you got more stuff. So anyways, that's enough on Classified. But if you talk to him and you like this chat, I'd love to have him on.
But, good. I'll tell him. I will tell him for sure. Yeah, that's funny that you were there that night, man. I remember that being a great show because the whole room was filled with mega fans. So they were jamming super hard. It was really loud.
In a half pipe.
In a half pipe. Yeah, I would have forgotten. Good man. Yeah, that's awesome.
So good. David, congratulations again on the release of It's Only a Little Loneliness. Congratulations on That Tall Distance being Juno Award-winning instrumental album. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me on the Release Day Series podcast.
Right on. I appreciate it, Alex. Thanks so much. Take care.
You can discover more podcast episodes as well as our limited video series on our website, www.releasedayseries.com. And if you'd like to support the show, we've added that option to the website as well. Send us $1, $3, $5, whatever you'd like. Any support helps. But most importantly, we appreciate you listening and sharing the podcast.